The suicide bomber who died inside a taxi when his device blew up outside a hospital in Liverpool on Remembrance Sunday has been unmasked as a pizza-baking Christian convert and failed asylum seeker. Mail Online can reveal that Enzo Almeni, 32, arrived in the UK from Iraq several years ago and converted from Islam to Christianity in 2017 at the cathedral it is believed he wanted to attack yesterday. Friends said Almeni was born Ahmad Jamil al-Swelmeen to a Syrian father and an Iraqi mother, and is believed to have spent a large part of his life in Iraq. He was arrested for possession of a large knife after the rejection of his asylum claim in 2014. This resulted in him being sectioned under the Mental Health Act and hospitalized for several months. It is thought that Almeni was a motor racing fan who changed his name by deed poll in honor of Italian supercar creator Enzo Ferrari, and in a bid to sound more Western on his asylum application. Almeni spent most of his time in the UK in Liverpool, where he was being supported by Christian volunteers from a network of churches who help asylum seekers. He spent 8 months living with devout Christians Malcolm and Elizabeth Hitchcock at their home in the Aigburth district of Liverpool. Almeni converted to Christianity in Liverpool's Anglican Cathedral 4 years ago, which it is thought he had wanted to attack on Remembrance Sunday as 1,200 military personnel, veterans and families of the fallen gathered to observe the 11 a.m. minutes silence. It is thought he initially asked Mr. Perry to drive him to the cathedral, but that traffic and road closures stopped him from getting there. It is believed he died after being locked in a cab by hero taxi driver David Perry as it exploded into a fireball outside Liverpool Women's Hospital. Detectives and MI5 spies are investigating whether the bombing was an Islamist-inspired attack and if Almeni had been motivated to kill himself and others. Security sources told the Mail that Almeni's mental health problems were a key line of inquiry in understanding his motivation. Speaking exclusively to Mail Online today, Mr. Hitchcock, a former British Army soldier, said he met Almeni in 2015 through his work at Liverpool Cathedral when he started expressing an interest in converting to Christianity. He also revealed that Almeni was refused asylum once before, saying, he was refused asylum in 2014 by the UK. He had his case decided, rejected, because he has been sectioned because of some mental health incident. Mr. Hitchcock said, he first came to the cathedral in August 2015 and wanted to convert to Christianity. He took an Alpha course, which explains the Christian faith, and completed it in November of that year. That enabled him to come to an informed decision and he changed from Islam to Christianity and was confirmed as a Christian by at least March 2017, just before he came to live with us. He was destitute at that time and we took him in. Police said Almeni was picked up in the Rutland Avenue area of the city. As the car reached the hospital's passenger drop-off point, it exploded. Police said he had been living at a hostel for asylum seekers, run by private contracting giant Serco, in Sutcliffe Street, Liverpool, for some time before renting a bomb factory 2 miles away in Rutland Avenue. 4 men arrested under terrorism laws in the Kensington area of Liverpool, 3 aged 21, 26 and 29, who were held on Sunday, and a man aged 20 who was detained on Monday, have now been released from police custody following interview, Counter-Terrorism Police Northwest said on Monday night. MI5 is assisting police with the investigation. Meanwhile, forensic officers continue the delicate task of searching the bomb factory from where Almeni booked the taxi. 8 nearby homes have been evacuated, and officers on Monday carried out a controlled explosion on an item taken from the property in nearby Sefton Park in what they described as a precaution. Detective Chief Inspector Andrew Meeks of Counter-Terrorism Police Northwest said, "Our inquiries are very much ongoing, but at this stage we strongly believe that the deceased is 32-year-old Ahmad al-Swelmeen. Al-Swelmeen is connected to both the Rutland Avenue and Sutcliffe Street addresses where searches are still ongoing. We believe he lived at the Sutcliffe Street address for some time and had recently rented the Rutland Avenue address. Our focus is the Rutland Avenue address where we have continued to recover significant items. We continue to appeal for any information about this incident, and now that we have released his name, any information that the public may have about al-Swelmeen, no matter how small, may be of great assistance to us." The UK's terror threat level was raised to severe today following an emergency Cobra meeting at Downing Street. Police and security services advised the Prime Minister that another attack on British soil is now highly likely. It came exactly a month after Conservative MP Sir David Ames was fatally stabbed during a constituency surgery in Leigh-on-Sea, Essex. At a COVID press briefing this afternoon, Boris Johnson dramatically urged the country to be vigilant and called the blast a stark reminder of the risks of terrorism. Home Secretary Priti Patel cancelled a planned trip to Paris to discuss the Channel migrant crisis so she could be briefed on the Liverpool bombing. "Here's what we know about the terror attack so far," Assistant Chief Constable Russ Jackson said on Monday night. "Following interviews with the arrested men, we are satisfied with the accounts they have provided and they have been released from police custody. The investigation continues to move at a fast pace with investigative teams working throughout the night. We have made significant progress since Sunday morning and have a much greater understanding of the component parts of the device, how they were obtained and how the parts are likely to have been assembled. We have also recovered important evidence from the address at Rutland Avenue which is becoming central to the investigation. There is a considerable way to go to understand how this incident was planned, prepared for and how it happened. We are gaining a better understanding by the hour, but it is likely to be some time, perhaps many weeks, until we are confident on our understanding of what has taken place." Mr. Hitchcock exclusively told Mail Online, "He was Syrian through his father, but I gather he spent much of his life in Iraq, where his mother came from. As far as I can recall, we never spoke in any great length about the situation in Iraq and Syria. We may have touched on it once or twice, but he gave nothing away about what he felt about it. I don't think he ever went back to Iraq or Syria. I know that he had a brother who lived in Dubai and often spent time between there and Iraq. Enzo used to send him money. He was good company. We would sometimes go on days out. Myself, Enzo and my wife Marion visited Speke Hall on one occasion and took some nice images together. But his behavior changed ever so slightly towards the end of the period he lived with us. He stated to ask odd questions. I remember he came into the kitchen once and said, 'Is there anything you want to ask me?' I was a bit taken aback and replied, 'No.' 'Why do you ask? You've been here 6 months.' He then showed me a letter addressed to him that had been torn at the top of the envelope and he accused me of opening it to see what was inside. But I hadn't at all. The envelope was torn as it had been pushed through the letterbox. I showed him a letter addressed to me that had been torn in the same way, but I don't think he was completely convinced. Myself and my wife went on holiday in November 2017 and told Enzo he could stay at our house while we were away, but he said he wanted to leave and get his own place. He left and we had little contact with him from then on in, apart from when he invited us to a Christmas Carol concert in December 2017 at the Williamson Tunnels. He added, "My wife saw him before lockdown and he seemed to be in very good spirits." He said that had enrolled in a catering course specializing in cake decorating at a college in Liverpool. "The fact that he's blown himself up in a taxi in a terrorist attack has really shocked me. As far as I knew his only interest was go-karting and Formula One." Speaking at a press conference this morning, Assistant Chief Constable Russ Jackson of Counter-Terrorism Northwest said they know the identity of the taxi passenger and believe that he made the bomb. He said, "It is not clear what the motivation for this incident is. Our inquiries indicate that an improvised explosive device has been manufactured and our assumption so far is that this was built by the passenger in the taxi. The reason why he then took it to the women's hospital is unknown, as is the reason for its sudden explosion. We are of course aware that there were remembrance events just a short distance away from the hospital and that the ignition occurred shortly before 11 a.m. We cannot at this time draw any connection with this, but it is a line of inquiry we are pursuing. Although the motivation for this incident is yet to be understood, given all the circumstances, it has been declared a terrorist incident and counter-terrorism policing are continuing with the investigation. Our inquiries will now continue to seek to understand how the device was built, the motivation for the incident and to understand if anyone else was involved in it. Investigators have attributed the bomber to both the addresses but police are not yet sure where he lived, and last night at 9:45 p.m. anti-terror officers forced their way into the front and back of the Sutcliffe Street house as they tried to establish if he was a lone wolf or part of a cell. Suspects were seen with their hands up in the rear yard, as officers trained their rifles on them and told them to get on the floor. Matthew Heitman, 26, who lives opposite the raided house, said, "Two of the men were marched out at gunpoint and they had him up against the wall. The people living there had not long moved in, maybe weeks or months." Another neighbor, Sharon Cullen, said she and her husband, 22-year-old daughter and 2-year-old grandson were evacuated from their home. She said, "The police pounded on my door and an officer said we need to get you out of the house as soon as possible. They said whatever is going on at the back of the house, it could blow the block. It was really frightening." Mr. Perry has been credited with saving many lives after keeping the suspect inside his cab in the moments before it blew up. His wife has revealed he is doing okay but is extremely sore, while adding that his escape was an utter miracle. Rachel Perry wrote on Facebook, "I would just like to thank each and every one of you who has messaged asking how David is. He is doing okay but is extremely sore and trying to process what's happened." Detectives say the male passenger who died in the blast had asked to go Liverpool's Women's Hospital, around 10 minutes drive from his home in Rutland Avenue, which police have sealed off. They also evacuated 8 neighbors overnight amid fears it was being used as a bomb factory. Friends of Mr. Perry believe the target may have been the city's nearby service of remembrance at Liverpool's Anglican Cathedral, where 1,200 military personnel, veterans and families of the fallen had gathered less than a mile from the hospital. Roads around the cathedral had been closed before the 11 a.m. Poppy Day event. Mr. Perry escaped to safety a split second after a small blast blew out the windows and before flames spread through his vehicle. Friends said Mr. Perry had become alarmed when his passenger started flashing and vibrating as he pulled up, evidence of the device malfunctioning, experts said. Miraculously, the driver suffered just minor cuts and bruises as well as damage to an eardrum and was discharged from hospital. Mr. Perry was hailed a hero, with well-wishers donating more than £50,000 to help replace his cab. His wife said the family's overwhelming emotion was that he was lucky to be alive. CCTV has emerged capturing the horrifying moment Mr. Perry's taxi became a fireball outside the reception of Liverpool Women's Hospital, shortly before the 11 a.m. 2 minutes silence was due to take place yesterday. The dark-colored taxi is seen pulling into the hospital car park at speed, but it explodes before it comes to a halt outside the reception. All the windows shattered and smoke pours out of the car before a dazed Mr. Perry opens the driver's door and staggers out into the road around 6 seconds after the blast. The injured taxi driver then appears to warn others to stay away from the car, and there has also been praise for a man in high-vis yellow who runs towards the blazing taxi to help him. Around 30 seconds after the explosion, with smoke belching out of the car, it is engulfed by flames with the bomber still inside. One witness can be seen looking into the back seat passenger. He decides the passenger is dead and can't be saved. Police are scrambling to discover the bomber's true target. If it was the hospital, Dr. Joseph Downing, a fellow in nationalism at LSE who studies security and terrorism, told Mail Online, "It's quite strange and a worrying new pivot towards such a soft target as a hospital that we have not seen before in Europe." If Mr. Perry did lock the doors, today's terrifying video makes him look even braver, as he may have decided to stop the suspect entering the hospital's reception, even if it cost him his own life. A friend of married father of two, Mr. Perry, 45, said that he believed that the cathedral was the target, but traffic and road closures led to the passenger, who has not been formally identified, asking the driver to park at the nearby Liverpool Women's Hospital instead. If he locked him in, David appears to have stopped the man targeting the hospital as the clock struck 11 a.m. One theory police are probing is that the detonators on a potential bomb exploded but not the main charge. That would be a repeat of the failed 21/7 bombings 3 weeks after the 7/7 atrocity in 2005. David Vidicett, a former 7/7 counter-terror detective at Scotland Yard, said, "Improvised explosive devices have various components, with each having to operate in the correct order, at a desired point, for there to be an explosion. Sometimes the components don't operate in order or when desired. It's possible what we see here is a detonator explosion that has failed to set off the main charge." The Prime Minister has praised the taxi driver caught up in the Liverpool explosion for acting with incredible presence of mind and bravery. Speaking at a medical centre in East London on Monday, Boris Johnson echoed the city's Mayor Joanne Anderson in crediting the driver. Mr. Johnson said, "It does look as though the taxi driver in question did behave with incredible presence of mind and bravery." The investigation into the Remembrance Sunday explosion outside a Liverpool hospital is continuing. A friend said, "David noticed the man had some kind of light attached to his clothing and was messing around with it. It didn't look right at all. They couldn't get there. The roads were blocked off. The man changed his mind and asked to go to the city centre instead. But when they were going past the women's hospital, he said to pull in there. It was just before 11. David noticed the man had some kind of light attached to his clothing and was messing around with it. It didn't look right at all. I don't know how he's done it with a split-second's thought, but David's jumped out and locked the car with this guy in the back. As soon as he did, it's gone off. If this guy got in the hospital, God knows what could have happened. David's the luckiest man in Britain as well as the most heroic. Miraculously, he suffered just minor cuts and bruises as well as damage to an eardrum. Last night he was discharged from hospital, insiders told Mail Online, while bomb squad including experts from the army remained at the hospital. Another friend added, David suffered cuts and bruises, a perforated eardrum and needed stitches in his ear. Helby saw in the morning but HES home. I'm just glad no new babies were leaving at the time. For David to have probably been terrified and think so fast and then end up okay, it's amazing. Locals said armed police ordered residents to leave, saying the area wasn't safe and were pointing guns at a house. Residents of the street were given 5 minutes to grab some belongings before being evacuated. The operation appears to have ended at around 3:30 a.m. and the cordon remains in place this morning. Carl Besant, whose partner had just had a baby at the hospital, said, she was feeding the baby when it happened. We heard a loud bang and looked out of the window. We saw the car on fire and someone jumped out, screaming, and there was someone inside the car. The hospital shut down, no one in or out, so they said, but people were using the back entrance. Sections of Bowler Street and Sutcliffe Street remained cordoned off, with a heavy police presence at the scene as inquiries continued today. A similar police scene was in place at Rutland Avenue several miles away in Sefton Park, with a large number of armed officers seen in the neighborhood. Locals said police arrived from about 1 p.m. as officers went on to guard a terraced property as the immediate surrounding area was cordoned off. Around 11:30 p.m., witnesses said roads were being evacuated, with taxis and at least 2 minibuses arriving at the scene to take residents to alternative accommodation. Shortly before 10 p.m. Ryan O'Neill tweeted that armed police pointing guns at the house gave him 5 minutes to pack and leave Bowler Street with his partner and children. Counter-terror negotiators were also called to the scene and facilities for residents were being set up in a nearby leisure center. Police early Monday said, a large cordon is in place on Rutland Avenue in Liverpool and a small number of addresses have been evacuated as a precaution. This is part of our ongoing inquiries into the car explosion outside the city's women's hospital on Sunday morning. Footage filmed from the hospital showed the car burning fiercely as voices can be heard gasping in shock. A shocked man is seen holding his head in his hands before being led away by hospital staff. Locals described hearing a loud bang and seeing smoke rising from the hospital grounds just before 11 a.m. Father of 2 Matt Kerr, 52, said, I had just sat down to watch the Remembrance Sunday service as my family have served in the army when I heard a bang. I did a double take and just wondered what it was. I looked out and saw smoke, then there were police everywhere and helicopters. It's scary to think someone might have wanted to hurt women and children. Mother of 1 Emily Makefield, 32, said, I was walking nearby when I heard a bang and saw the smoke. It's terrifying this could happen at a women's hospital. It's shocking. Shop worker Sandra Hughes, 35, said, I saw people being turned away from hospital and police everywhere. It's terrifying to think someone might have wanted to attack a hospital. Social media was last night flooded with praise for the taxi driver's heroism. Stephen Thomas said online, he is my mate, and he spotted the passenger acting suspicious. H is in hospital. Luckily he escaped just before, but he did suffer some injuries. Kev Cuthbertson also wrote on Facebook, he is a hero. When he noticed the bomb he locked the scumbag in the car but took the brunt of the blast. Billy Darwin added, I've heard he has injuries, so on behalf of us all on here I wish this Liverpool hero a speedy recovery. He put his life on the line and nearly paid the ultimate price to save others, apparently not giving anything a second thought besides making sure he went above and beyond to keep the people of our city safe. Marie Davies said, he stopped by the women's hospital and locked the man in his cab after noticing the device. Phil Garrigan, Chief Fire Officer of Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service, said the car fire was fully developed when two appliances arrived shortly after 11 a.m. He told reporters at the scene, the operational crews extinguished the fire rapidly, but as has been reiterated by the police chief constable, there was one fatality. Another individual had left the vehicle prior to the fire developing to the extent that it did. Our thoughts are with them and the families of those involved. In a statement, Northwest Ambulance Service said, at 10:59 a.m. today we were called to reports of a car explosion at Liverpool Women's Hospital. We were on scene by 11:04 a.m. One person has died and another person was treated for serious but not life-threatening injuries, before being taken to hospital. In a statement, the hospital, which was featured on the hit Channel 4 series One Born Every Minute and looks after around 50,000 patients a year, said, we are reviewing our patient activity for the next 24 to 48 hours and patients should wait to be contacted for updates about any planned appointments or other attendance at the hospital. Our staff are being permitted to leave and enter the hospital under the supervision of Merseyside Police. We would like to say thank you for the cooperation and support of our patients, visitors and staff who have been impacted by this incident, in particular those members of staff who were at the scene at the time of the incident. Women were told to avoid the hospital over the next 24 hours unless directly contacted by staff and told to attend their appointments.